Welcome to Feminist Question Time, brought to you by Women's Declaration International, the leading global organisation defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. There's more information on our website, womensdeclaration.com, where you'll find our declaration on women's sex-based rights. It's been signed by 37,038 people from 160 countries and is supported by 517 organisations. If you haven't signed it and are all new to this webinar, welcome to the webinar, and do take a look at the declaration and hopefully sign it if you could. We have many volunteer activists, and we have country contacts from every continent engaged in defending women's rights. Do join us as an activist or a country contact if you could represent WDI and do promote the declaration in your country. There's a new policy document that came out of the United Nations on the 31st of October, so very, very recently. And it's about sport, and it's incredibly concerning. And I'll just run through little bits of it so you can have a look at it. It's saying it's a coming up to a sporting chance forum of the United Nations, and because they're referring to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in relation to sports, and then they say this is saying sport's an expression of life. It's important for everybody. Practice of sport without discrimination comes under Article here 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And so they refer to LOADS and CEDAW, which is an important women's rights mechanism. Then they say how great sport is, what it can do, notion of fairness. Here we are, this is an inextricable practice of sport. And then say, but there is inequality. And then you will have guessed it. What they go on to say is that gender identity is incredibly important. It's enshrined, they're saying, enshrined under human rights framework from the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law and right to equal protection under law, and then cite the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So it's very well written, and it's very sort of powerfully sort of sounds very, very credible, and as if they're just working on good principles that are internationally recognized in Universal Declaration. And then using this language, the categoric and blanket exclusion of trans and intersex women from is a prima facie violation of their human rights. So this is the old Stonewall argument, this making out that a man who says he's a woman has the right to do sport as a woman, and that it's a violation of his human rights not to be able to do sport as a woman. Anyway, this document, we'll put it in the chat. I'll stop sharing and go on. I've sort of shared it because it explains a bit why we are, as WDI, mounting a sort of defense of women's sex-based rights, and the declaration does that. But a thing we're doing now is we're going to set up, or we are setting up, a specific UN lobby group that is going to be lobbying the United Nations using the declaration with our 37,000 signatories, but also really in detail countering some of these arguments, and specifically this news statement that's been put out by one of the departments of the United Nations. So if you could get involved in that, we would like to form a group of activists, women, who could help really push this forward and do serious lobbying on the United Nations. Also, if you know any government representatives, if you're somebody you know represents your government at the United Nations, or you know people on any of the committees, it would be really helpful if you could get in touch, and we can build up our lobbying capacity more, and we could sort of do that. So that's another thing. Final thing is we have got our WDI logos ready, and we have not quite got the way of sending them out yet, but we will get that there. So what what I've done is they're iron-on, and then I've ironed it on top of my logo, which was, I think it said LA Gear, which was sort of something that doesn't really matter and maybe is actually a bad organization, but it said that. So I've ironed it on top of my bad logo and put our logo on top of it, and then you can sew it on and you can put them on all sorts of different places. So we're hoping that this, which symbolizes the fight to defend women's sex-based rights internationally, this logo, you can order them, so we'll start putting that out. Our speakers today are Matos from Brazil. Her talk is called "The End of Statistics: Brazilian Elections and Women's Rights." Then we're going to have Jan Williams from the UK, who's going to give us an update on what's happening at Hampstead Ladies Pond, which is a women-only pond, which is under threat of saying men can be women. Then we're going to have Roxie Roots from Germany, who's going to talk about her current projects, and then Alison Jenner from UK Women in the Liberal Democrats, and talk about the fantastic work that Alison and others have been doing within the political party, the Liberal Democrats. They've just done a huge amount of work very successfully in the last 1 year. So that will be great to hear about. Matos is from Brazil, and she is an advocate for women's rights. She's interested in the study of feminist epistemology, has a bachelor's degree in law, graduated in tax law, and is currently an undergraduate student in history. She's going to talk about the topic, "The End of Statistics, Brazilian Elections and Women's Rights." So thank you so much, and lovely to meet you here, Matos, and over to you.
A timeline that I made for you to get to know a little bit about the history of Brazil for those who don't know. Brazil is a country with a history of massacre the native people by Portuguese crown, and with a history of 300 years of slavery, very similar to all countries in the continent called America, but also the last country to freedom the people slavery. So after all these centuries of absence of democracy and human rights, women could only be considered equal to men, in other words, a full human being, at the end of the 80s of the 20th century. Another important event was the process of impeachment that our first female president suffered in 2016. As you can imagine, our presence in politics is so reduced that she could be elected only because her predecessor supported her for the position and couldn't run for election anymore. Also, he left the government with 90% of approval. But soon, her opponents invented a way to remove her from power. After, of course, suffering several misogynistic attacks, including by the media, which propagated that she did not have the skills and the behavior to be a president. So my two main concerns in this research, when I began to study this issue of gender ideology in Brazil, was how quickly it spread and the way in which women are being prevented from discussing their own materiality. First, the taking of women's space, and secondly, the symbolic representation of these trans-identifying males on the mainstream media and in the social media. They are always on the news only because of their condition or way of life being on top rankings, while are so many qualified and competent women. As you can see, although women are the electoral majority in Brazil, the numbers of women entering public and political life remain low. In 2020 Brazilians election, women who represent more than 51.8% of the population and more than 52% of Brazilians' electorate are still a minority in politics. That year, 12.1% were elected to a mayoral post, compared with 87.9% of men. As for the municipal legislative chambers, women represented only 16% of elected to the position of councillor. After 2009, this law intended to equalize political participation by reserving 30% of political parties' vacancies for women. Other proposals have dragged on over the years without definitive approval. However, changing sex in the civil registry and the social name policy make it possible for any man to claim the seats reserved in political parties exclusively for women. This is because Brazil's Superior Electoral Court has determined that under the pretext of respecting individuality and the principle of human dignity, a candidate's social name can be included in the electoral candidacy of trans-identifying people. And the Federal Supreme Court recognizes the right of trans-identifying people to change their first name and sex directly in the civil registry, regardless of gender reassignment, surgery, or hormonal treatments. According to official statistical data available on the Supreme Electoral Court website, 171 people applied with a social name. Of these, 11 were considered unfit to stand. 82.5% self-identified as a woman, while 17.5% self-identified as a man. So, are you noticing the reverse effect of the percentages? This is a fact to reflect on. And this trans-identifying male below on the slide were elected. However, other trans-identifying male do not appear in the table of people elected with a social name made available by the court. This means that they are outside the official Brazilian government statistics on elected trans-identifying people. This Brazilian National Association of Transvestites and Transsexuals states that in 2020, the country achieved a record of 275% increase in trans-identifying people elected, compared with 2016, the highest number in the country's history. In 30 trans-identifying candidates were elected, all to the positions of councillor. Of these 30, 28 are trans-identifying males, and only 2 are trans-identifying women. Women who self-identify as a man are the smallest part of these statistics. This absence of official statistic about who are these people who are changing their names, their sex, and after all, this gender ideology, which we are prohibited to ask someone's birth sex, is about to usurp public policies aimed at women, who are historically hindered from entering careers in politics by several factors, particularly the sexual oppression suffered in childhood throughout their lives. In this slide, I bring one of these trans-identifying males who are outside the official Brazilian government statistics. This is Benny Brioli from the Socialism and Liberty Party, a transvestite who is the first and recorded as the only woman elected in the city of Niterói in 2020. In this news, we read, the city of Niterói celebrates female equality and combats violence against women, with the photo of this trans considered the only woman elected to the council. I show you another case Another one is Lins Robalo from the Workers' Party, was the first trans-identifying male and recorded as the only woman elected in the city of São Borja. Also outside the statistics of social name and elected as a woman. Finally, two other cases that call us attention. Duda Salaber from the Democratic Labour Party was the most voted for man and person in the history of the city of Belo Horizonte, which is a big city in Brazil. And this year, 2023, was recognized as one of the 100 personalities in the world capable of transforming the next generation of leaders by Time magazine. And the second is known as Erica Hilton, a trans-identifying male from the Socialism and Liberty Party, who now figures in the 2022 BBC's list of 100 most influential women, was elected to the City Council of São Paulo, the largest and the most important city in Brazil, and holds the title of most voted for women, in both the council and the country. And my question to you is, are they getting the most votes because they are trans or because they are representing women? And finally, I bring some points and questions for everyone to reflect on, which are allowing trans-identifying males to be recognized as women gives society the false idea that females occupy the positions of the most voted for people in the country, when this is the purest untruth. In 2022, the official data points to a 373.83% growth in candidates with a social name since the 2018 elections. More than 37,000 people choose to be identified by their social name. And the questions that remain unanswered are, how many of these people will benefit from the reservations of places for female-only applications? And how many women will be left out once again from electoral positions? And that would be all. Thank you.
So we'll go to our next speaker. It's Jan Williams from the UK. She's the founder or co-founder of Object UK, which is a fantastic organisation, declaration signatory, and she's sort of helped launch the declaration many years ago now in New York, so has been involved with us and very closely linked with us for ages, but now is working very hard on a campaign to defend women's sex-based rights to swim in a fantastic open-air swimming pool on Hampstead Heath in North London, which has been over 100 years of women's space, which is now being attacked. So Jan, thank you so much for coming on, and over to you to tell women what's going on.
I was the reviver of Object, not the co-founder. I'd hate to, not to allow Sasha Rakoff her honour as the founder. Back to the pond. It is the only women's pond in the whole of Europe. It's known as the ladies' pond from the days in which ladies were ladies, and in some ways they still are. It's a beautiful woodland pool. It's got a little meadow next to it. It's very, very private because of all the trees around it, and women are allowed to and often do go topless there. It's unfortunately the very nice ladies who run the user group, which is called the Kenwood Ladies Pond Association, the KLPA, have been captured by gender ideology and are busy being nice, letting anyone who identifies as a woman come and swim and sit at the pond. The pond is owned and operated by the City of London, a huge, massive financial conglomerate, completely captured by gender ideology. The most famous figure you might have heard of is one Edward Lord, And very kindly, the City of London invited the Kenwood Ladies Pond Association Committee to training run by a company called Gendered Intelligence, who promote a very specific interpretation of the law, which is a little bit outdated and a little bit contested, shall we say. And they've been convinced by this, and they think that single-sex spaces are not required. They have their AGM, their annual general meeting, in March every year, and a number of us were there for last March, and people kindly elected me onto the committee of the Kenwood Ladies Pond Association. Some of you I see in there were there and voted for me. Thank you very much. I was very concerned when I joined, because, oh yes, there's a lovely picture of the pond come up. See how gorgeous it is, and you swim with the ducks. It's lovely. You have to be able to swim strongly because, and you know, you can't take little kids in there because it's, you know, it's got deep water in it, but it is wonderful. So here we go. Last AGM, they put forward a motion basically saying that they would disregard UK law. UK law says that if you have a protected characteristic, for example, gender identity or a number of other different ones, then the spaces can be protected by law. And they were going to propose a motion which would go against this law, saying that anyone could use the pond who thought they were a woman, irrespective of protected characteristics. Now, clearly, that would have been a motion in defiance of the law, and fortunately, it was voted down. I have been on the committee. I've been going to lovely meetings in people's houses and serving breakfasts at the pond and selling merchandise and helping and offering to perhaps widen the attraction of the pond. Our job on the committee is to promote the pond and encourage women to use it. And I've been concentrating on that aspect of it, suggesting that perhaps a local single parent organisation could have a bit of a deal. The Kenwood Ladies Pond Association is very rich. It has £37,000 in the bank and isn't really sure what to do with it. So I thought maybe we could give free swimming to local single parents. It's also quite hard to get to the pond. So we thought maybe we could run a shuttle service on the weekends for people to come to the free swimming time in the afternoon to help people that haven't got cars, like the committee. The committee all seem to have cars. Help people who haven't got cars to get there more easily. The ladies on the committee all seem to swim in the early morning. How lucky they are. No children to look after, no job to rush off to, no elderly parents to go and care for. They're all very well off and very nice ladies, and they just drive along, park their cars in the road by the pond, and in they get and see all their friends, which is very nice for them. They're now proposing that we have an extraordinary general meeting, which you'd think was just for emergencies, and there isn't an emergency. They're saying that they just want to tidy up the constitution, the rules of operating of the association. But actually what they're proposing is very, very radical. They don't want people like me, who aren't part of their little clique, to come onto the committee. So they're suggesting that unless you can prove that you swim at the pond at least once every fortnight, you're not eligible to be part of the user group committee. Now, they'd have to police everyone. Imagine what domestic violence victims would think about that. Where would that information go? How does that fit in with data protection? In order to put this in, they'd have to, I think, go against data protection laws, and they'd be excluding most women with jobs or kids or caring responsibilities. And that is most women across the board. Already, because men are allowed in, all the women from religious communities are self-excluding themselves. The Muslim community, the Orthodox Jewish community, I've heard a lot of Hindu ladies are reluctant to go to a pond where there might be men. And they're proposing making this even more difficult. It's like a swimmer's apartheid. They've even stopped people joining the association for the 2 weeks in the run-up to this EGM, Extraordinary General Meeting, because they're afraid people will join to vote against it. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. So there should be a Twitter thread coming out about this tomorrow, so please have a look out there. It will be from the Women's Rights Network, colloquially known as WREN, another very supportive organisation, many of whose members are also members of this Kenwood Ladies Pond Association. And if this all seems, and as it probably will, very far away and very small to those of you in other parts of the world, this is a symbolic thing. If the gender ideologists can take away the one ladies' pond in Europe, they can take away anything, and we know that they are trying to. Someone's just made a very good point in the chat. There are 3 ponds in this area. There is a men's pond where women are not allowed to go. There is a mixed pond where you can go if you're a mixed group of people, and of course men can go there. And there is the ladies' pond where men can go too. So men effectively have a choice of 3 ponds, and women, if they want to swim in a women-only space, have got 0 ponds. It's not a good idea. We've had some guidance from the EHRC in this country about how our law operates. And the guidance actually uses the example of a swimming pool. It says if there were to be a public swimming pool, which only ever held mixed sessions, then it should change that policy, and to accommodate religious minorities, it should put on women-only sessions. Now, that obviously, I would say, also applies to the ladies' pond. If they insist on implementing gender ideology, and I think we may be having to go for a legal challenge here eventually, then they should at least say at some times it's the ladies only. They should have some kind of policy. This should go back to being a women-only space in line with the law of this country and in line with the EHRC guidance. So please join us in our symbolic victory. Please go online and look up the Kenwood Ladies Pond Association, the KLPA. You won't be able to join it until after the 12th of this month, but it will only cost you £5 to join it after that. Please do. Please come and use this wonderful, wonderful pond. You do have to pay, although I am working to get better access, particularly if you're a single parent. Come and see how lovely it is. Bring your children, if they're your daughters, if they are swimmers and over the age of 8. And see how lovely it is. Enjoy it, meet with other women. You can go topless there in full safety, away from the eyes of men, and you can relax with your mates and your family. When you've done that, start coming to the meetings, because we are going to need your votes to vote down these stupid, stupid policies and to get back to the proper purpose of this user group, which is to promote the pond for the use of women and to make it easier for all women to access the pond.
So our next speaker now is Roxie Roots from Germany. Roxie is a survivor, truth teller and activist. Since exiting the sex trade, by realising and accepting the impact her early childhood trauma had, she's unravelling the patterns of manipulation and narcissistic abuse and speaks freely of her life and the lessons that she's learned from it in the hopes of raising awareness. Now, some of you will remember Roxie coming on Feminist Question Time about a year ago, which was completely brilliant. And thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming on again and telling us what you've been doing recently. So thanks so much, Roxie, and over to you.
So I wanted to update on my recent projects. I wanted to talk about my first big talk at Philia, which finally actually addressed the stuff that I want to talk about, or that I think is a bit overlooked still, or there's not many survivors that are actually talking about it, which is the digital sexual exploitation industries in forms of OnlyFans and the webcam industry, which was before OnlyFans, and that was the topic of my talk that I had at Philia, which was a huge panel with lots of different women from all sorts of backgrounds and different areas of prostitution industry, and yeah, so I was very delighted to be shining a light into this industry, which hasn't really been understood, I think, in depth, and how it actually works, how muddled the lines are between like social media and then women stumbling onto these platforms. All of them obviously selling the same thing as every other part of the sex trade, which is independence. It's very easy and it's an easy job, but the reality obviously being very, very different, very, very different from that. I talked about how the seller kind of like being in this world, in this day and age where pornography has led to, every type of woman, everyone being like categorized, and that women are being like drawn into this industry, being told that they can be, they can just be themselves, and they themselves create their persona. But the reality is that the buyers create your persona. If you look a certain way, you will be put in a box that fits your look. It's not the other way around. And yeah, I think that's kind of like just a little summary about what I spoke about at Philia. And I want to draw attention to this topic being discussed next weekend in London, where I'm going to be at the Nordic Model Now conference, which is the topic is also broadly prostitution and the different important aspects that are relating to it. And I'm going to be speaking on OnlyFans as well. And there will be there will be an online access in case you can't make it to London. So do please join. It's a very interesting event with lots of different speakers, like Huske Mau from Germany, for example, as well. Yeah, so that's that. Oh yeah, and then another project that I've just started, or that, well, we've been dealing with for the last couple of months, but that we are ready to release now, is a abolitionist, sex trade abolitionist podcast that's called Red Light Expose, that I'm doing with how many are we? 10, I think 10 women right now. For example, Andrea Hines, Mia Doering from Ireland, Ali Marie Diamond from Australia and New Zealand, April Eve Weberg, there's Michelle Abel. Like, we are basically, a whole collective of different women from all over the globe, and we are maybe still open to have others join. Other survivors. So it is survivor led, and we want to just shine a light in a very detailed way, because we are so many different women and we can focus on very different aspects. We are wanting to give survivor a chance to voice their story, and we want to do this very professionally. We don't want to do this like just a side thing, but we actually want to set this up very professionally. Our date that we're hoping to release the first couple of episodes already will be the start of 2024. And we are trying to still raise some funds on a crowdfunder, because we actually want to make sure that everyone has a good technical devices like microphones, but we also want to have a little fund that we can use to pay the women, the survivors that are coming to speak, so that they actually have more than just a little pocket money for actually doing this and speaking to us and sharing their story. Yeah, so that's all of my recent projects, or upcoming projects, I mean, actually. So the next thing is my ongoing project, which I started last summer, so before the summer holidays. A RadFem teacher friend of mine in Germany here teaches like teenagers, and through them actually or through her just being an awesome teacher and actually picking up on stuff that the class is talking about. The topic of sexism, I think in German rap came up, and these 14, 15-year-olds are obviously very, like they know what's going on, obviously. And I think for some women, it's still kind of like shocking, some, older people, that's it's very shocking how much they know and how sexualized their languages and everything. But the good thing was that this class was actually really, or especially the girls, they wanted to actually talk about this topic, talk about, I think it was in German in literature, where they compared like the sexism in the rap music in Germany or in worldwide to, any kind of like literature which shows women and men in these certain roles. And then I think pornography and prostitution came up because that is also being addressed in many rap songs and stuff. And then she picked up this conversation, this teacher, about if women, if women want to use their bodies to get rich and stuff, it's their thing and all this kind of stuff. So very much already like indoctrinated into this madness. And this was a really good point, and I'm really highly regard her teaching style, being like, hey, this is very interesting what you said there. Can we actually talk about it? And then they talked about it, which then led to her dropping my name and being like, look, even and especially this pornography stuff that you are, that you are growing up amongst, can lead to a very different or very misleading picture of this world. And my friend Roxie, actually, she's experienced this, and she will literally tell you that none of the stuff that you've just said and that you think about these industries are actually true, and the reality is very different. And so she invited me, because actually the girls were asking, like lots of the girls were like, hey, can we, like, does she want to come? Can she tell her story? And yeah, so they booked me, and I had like 1 hour with a class of 14, 15-year-olds, mixed class, boys and girls. And all I did was tell my story, from my trauma, growing up, and then through school time. I address bullying, I draw the, very important links that are, I think, necessary for kids to understand so many different lessons and understand how important it is to learn boundaries, and so many other things, and self-worth. I talked about how I ended up in the sex trade after lots of relationships that have had where I didn't have any boundaries, how I was addicted to drugs, how I was leading a very, dissociated lifestyle. But I was always very authentic. I don't preach or something. I don't, I just tell them how it felt for me back then. I told them how I felt inside, going through being bullied, aka emotionally abused, for years, and all of these things, and how it makes you feel inside. All of this stuff that I think is really, lots of kids can relate to that. And yeah, so talking about the porn industry and all this kind of stuff, how I was duped by this glamorous and like easy money, by this fantasy, to then, I didn't talk into too much detail, but I just said, like, the sets that you're going to, the hotel rooms that you're going to, you never know what's happening behind these doors. You never know what's gonna you know, who is literally behind that door. You never know that. And they were listening to me for a full hour. There was no like kerfuffle or anything. There was just like a couple of boys in the back that were you know, seemingly uninterested at times, but they turned around and, you know, kept listening to me. And at the end, there were still some questions. The girls were the ones that had empathy, and the boys were wanting to ask me if, oh man, like, you know, the men in the porn industry, like they must have a really good job. And I literally, everything that they hopefully said that would kind of like make it not as bad for them to watch it. I had a very honest and also a very blunt response to, and I think I think I did it. I think at least I made them I shocked them with some reality, especially these boys, you know, that were so, you know, still kind of hoping and, you know, not really you know, feeling anything. But the girls, I think I hopefully just reached them and made them understand that, you know, lots of women go through this kind of like issue with self-worth. And all I said, like, I think my last sentence was just like, I think what we need in this world, and what we still haven't gotten, not even through this, or especially not through this pornography and like any kind of sexual interaction is good, is the, you know, respectful eye to eye like intimacy, like actual intimacy. And I think like there's only one way of getting there, which is that you know about the impact of this porn culture, and you decide for yourself, no, you know, it's not about purity, it's not about any church stuff or any, you know, religious stuff. It's just about me and my body and my mind. I am a whole person, and if I want to wait, and if I don't want to do that, if I feel anything in my guts, then I have to listen to myself, and to be very you know, yeah, to be very mindful in that sense, and respectful to yourself. And this is the only way to actually live sexuality, which is just respect and compassion.
Alison Jenner is in the Liberal Democrats in UK. Your work is amazing. You've done so much along with other people in the Lib Dems in Britain, and I think it will be a great inspiration to women all over the world. So over to you.
For me, this all started with an article that Baroness Lynn Featherstone wrote in the semi-official Lib Dem Voice. I've also a message to those people who believe they can restrict trans women's rights, deny their human rights. Obviously, we don't want to do that. Or exclude them, only the males, from women-only spaces in the name of feminism. You're not feminists. Your views are not welcome in the Liberal Democrats. Now, that I saw that, and it was like a hammer blow, and I really considered leaving. I was really fed up by this. In fact, my daughters had already piqued me to realise what was going on. I'd had no idea until they'd spoken to me. And I found this was really very depressing. And as I now understand, I think it's contrary to the Equality Act as well. There's guidance about this. They're not supposed to harass individual members. Anyway, I thought about going, and then I thought, well, if you leave, the water closes over your head, really. It's as if you never belonged there. And I've been a Liberal since 1979 and a Liberal Democrat since they started the new party. And I thought, well, I'm not going to go. So a lot of people I know are like this, and a lot of Liberal Democrats have left because of this sort of approach. And by the time of the Lib Dem conference in 2020, because of COVID, it was online, there were about, over half a dozen people that were already talking to each other. And 6 members of the Awkward Squad decided we'd speak about a motion that was up. And we only wanted to speak against 2 lines in a business motion, not a policy motion. And it was about providing mixed sex toilets at the conference, which obviously we no problem with that. But we said that the two lines said that trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary people are non-binary. And we thought that we tried to amend it to remove that bit because, of course, it's not literally true. Anyway, that wouldn't happen. So we spoke and gave our speeches. I tweeted my speech afterwards, which got some traction. And it also generated some complaints as well that I had actually spoken against party policy. But actually, in our party, Lib Dems are allowed to speak and to vote against party policy. Anyway, from that experience, we decided to get organised. In March 2021, we launched Liberal Voice for Women, quite simple to promote understanding of the protected characteristic of sex, and try to develop pro-women's campaigns, policies, events, conference motions, ensure that Lib Dem policies that undermine or compromise our rights get scrutinised and opposed, and try to ensure that the Lib Dems remain a home for open, respectful debate about issues that affect women. Clearly, with Baroness Featherstone's approach, that wasn't top of the list of activities. Anyway, so we launched this idea. We have got a website, http, you can see it at the bottom, liberalvoiceforwomen.org, and we're on Twitex, so we're at libvoice4women. We've also got a Facebook page, which doesn't get as much traffic, but sometimes it gets busy. And we have a number of different things. We actually have a monthly Zoom event on topical issues. We've got really expert speakers, authors, campaigners. We've had Helen Joyce, Kathleen Stocks, Sheila Jeffries, who I think is here today, came to speak to us last January. Janice Williams also came to speak to us this spring. And on 20th of November, we're going to speak to Louise Somerville and Emma Barraclough of Bad Policy Watch. They're looking into councils that pass motions which are against their public sector equality duty, and they're working hard to try and counteract that. And in December, we're speaking about trans widows to Tinsel Angel and Emma of Children of Transitioners. You can find some of our events. They've been recorded and they're on our YouTube channel. Our interview with Dr. David Bell, he was one of the whistleblowers at the Tavistock Institute. I think that's been quoted or referred to in an American paper. We also hold cross-party working sessions with Labour Women's Declaration and the Conservatives for Women and the Greens. And in fact, all the parties in the UK have got women's groups, pro-women's groups that are trying to counteract this sort of nonsense. And even if you don't actually believe in any particular, if you can't support the political notions of the main parties, you might want to set up and stand as an independent. I know people who used to be Lib Dem members have stood as independents since then. And we also organise Lib Dem only briefings for parliamentarians. Mostly recently, we had Sex Matters talking to our parliamentarians in a kind of private group where they could speak freely. This is really important, I think, for parliamentarians because in so many cases, they get barracked. As you know, we all get barracked by activists about this sort of thing. And giving a space where they can talk to experts about things that are really important about policies and acts of parliament, potential acts of parliament, is crucial. We also provide advice and training for councillors. Now, we don't have a lot of MPs in the Lib Dems, but we do have a lot of councillors. And our third one is coming up probably in December. Should have been yesterday, but one of our tutors was ill. And this is on the Equality Act 2010, the public sector equality duty that all public bodies have to make sure they foster good relations between the various people with protected characteristics. And also the Lib Dems have got quite a good pack where they tell you about doing equality impact assessments. And this is how you need to take into account the impact on other groups of any policies that you might be undertaking. And it's amazing how many bodies don't do any impact assessments on their policies. Just like turning the ladies' pond into mixed sex. It's just appalling the way that the consultation wasn't properly done. and the impact assessment wasn't carried out. So I think there's plenty of room there for a possibly judicial review. And these sessions have led to forming a WhatsApp group, a support group for councillors, where they can sort of air questions and occasionally get one-to-one advice. And we're pushing for policy changes. We've had petitions about puberty blockers, about free speech, and about conversion practices bill that might be coming up soon. And those have been signed by lots of our councillors and members and parliamentarians. They haven't had a huge impact so far because we've put in motions which have addressed things like conversion practices, puberty blockers. We tried to submit one for this autumn's conference, but it was turned down. However, we have been able to put forward a constitutional amendment. This was in March, this year's spring conference in York. And a constitutional amendment, if it's in order, has to be listened to. And so this, we thought, was a way to address an unfairness about the allocation of places on federal bodies, because many more men than women are appointed or elected. But there's also a little trick that they have of moving next business. If you don't think it's worth listening to, you can move on to the next business. But we were liberal enough to at the conference to vote for listening to the case of the people either side who wanted to have this motion. So Zoe, our chair, Dr. Zoe Hollowood, she had 2 minutes to speak to give a speech at conference, and that again is also on our YouTube. It is actually brilliant, and she gave this speech. It was turned down. They voted overwhelmingly not even to listen to the point of view of getting women's fair places on the various federal bodies. But Zoe's followers increased hugely, and you can see from here at the bottom of the of this picture, 507,000 views and 1.7 thousand likes and lots, hundreds of reposts of this. This is not one of our members, I have to say, but somebody obviously found it really interesting that Zoe was able to speak about this. So we're getting lots of traction with these. We've now got over 550 email subscribers. We've got over 800 YouTube subscribers. If you want to subscribe, you can add to that total. And we've got over 150 members who've signed our petitions. So we're providing support and community for Lib Dem members who believe that sex is real, that it's immutable, and that it is salient in certain circumstances. Now, I was a councillor on my local council. I'm still a parish councillor, but I got deselected last autumn, ready for the elections this May. But actually, in the meantime, we were standing for, and we got elected to a number of federal bodies. I was elected to the Federal Conference Committee, and 3 of us were elected onto the Federal Council, which is a new scrutiny body to overlook the board which manages the whole of the party. And lots of us have been elected onto the English Council. I'm on the regional executive, which is where a lot of the work to do with the parties gets done. This spring, we had a generous donation, so we were able to buy bulk copies of Hannah Barnes's book, Time to Think. If you haven't seen this, it's really good. It's about what happened in the Tavistock. It's a really well-balanced book as well. It's not sort of all one side. There's some pieces by transitioners saying their point of view as well. It's really thought-provoking. And we were able to give out copies to the leader, Ed Davey, some of the MPs, and also to a key party donor to talk to him about, is it good to be doing this? We also sent copies to leaders of Lib Dem run councils. There's about 40 or 50, and we had enough copies to send to about 45 councils. And councils are often the place where the services are provided and decisions are made about our daily life. For the past couple of years, we've also sent out Christmas cards to councillors, to parliamentarians, to our speakers and members across the country. The cards have a link to our website and our TwitX feed. And the first year, one councillor, who you'll see here, Councillor Scott Emery, he put up something you'll see in the picture, the first picture, why they're sending us Christmas cards, and made the point of his views being trans women and women, etc. But it attracted some negative comments, as you can see, from supporters and Twitter viewers all over the place. Operation They Do Our Work For Us was in progress here. And, it's the season, Scott. We're trying to make friends and make contacts with people. And that worked really well. I think we're making incremental steps. We feel that many peers and some MPs have been piqued by the trans activists' unreasonable demands. And we've got a new code of conduct which insists that we are supposed to be polite and respectful of those members with different views. We always try to be polite when we're speaking. And it's not necessarily the case that other people are polite about us. In fact, we've been accused of being an infestation of pubic lice, of being white supremacists, and being anti-Semites. And of course, none of these is the case. A local councillor, not here, but another part of England, who tweeted "fuck the TERFs," was reported by people from many different political standpoints. And he's been told to have some training about being polite to people. And he's supposed to be making a public apology in his November council meeting. But we're still being discriminated against by our party. At our recent autumn conference, we were again refused permission to have a stand, and we also applied at a commercial rate to have an advert of our fringe event, and this was turned out with no explanation at all. That's £700 we would have spent with the party, refused point blank. This, we think, contravenes the Equality and Human Rights Commission's guidance for political parties. And we've just been refused a stand at my regional conference. Again, more discrimination. We held our event, which was chaired by Dame Jenny Murray. British people will know that she was for 30 years, the hostess of Women's Hour. And it was introduced by our president, Baroness Sarah Ludford, who's taken an awful lot of stick for being a rational, sane person. And she's endured a lot of vicious abuse. And I think Jenny Murray had some stick as well. We had Raquel Rosario Sanchez in the room and Dr. Lauro Favaro, with also Vaishnavi Sundar on Zoom from India, each talking about the abuse of women's rights. And we launched our little booklet, you can see there, which is now lodged in the various deposit libraries across Britain and Ireland. So once they all get accessed and in the system, you can borrow these actually from the British Library, from the Bodleian Library in Oxford, or the Cambridge Library. There's also deposit libraries in Wales, Scotland, and in Trinity College Dublin, where you can access these from. So do borrow these, and the same is true of the WDI book too. One of the Lib Dem members, Natalie Bird, was a prospective parliamentary candidate who wore a T-shirt with "Woman, Adult, Human, Female" on it. She was banned for about 10 years, I think, from standing as a candidate again, which is absolutely, unbelievable. She now has a lawsuit out against the party, and we're waiting to see the outcome of a case by Dr. Shahrar Ali, his case against the Green Party for discrimination and unfair treatment, as we think that may be significant for not only Natalie Bird's case, but also the behaviour that the party has subjected us to. We carry on, and again, don't feel that you have to be a member of a party, but if you can subscribe to any of the political parties, then I would say join them. They're not allowed to discriminate against you. It's absolutely against the EHRC guidance for political parties, and we mustn't let them get away with it.